Hello, welcome to another episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. I'm Mike Evans.
And I'm David Price.
And David, what are we going to be talking about this week, I wonder?
I don't know.
You seem to have... I used to have one of those.
One of those?
I used to have one of those.
Yes.
Exactly, even with a bit of trim missing on the top. It's just like mine.
Was it a knackered one with a wonky spool centre?
I'm not... Look, when I come over to your house, I don't sort of say nasty, horrible things about your hi-fi when it's not in perhaps as pristine condition as it could be.
Don't you?
Not that I've seen any of your hi-fi not in pristine condition, which is maybe the issue here. It's not that knackered. It's pretty cool. This is mine, by the way, in case you're wondering where this is going. This is my Akai 4000 DB.
Yep.
DB because, guess why? It's got Dobbly. It's got a bit of Dobbly on it.
Dobbly, as they say in the
This
industry.
is not the bottom of the range version.
Yep.
If this were an Allegro, it would be the Van den Pla version. Can you stop drinking and pay a bit of attention here? I know you've got a bit of a cold, but you know you seem to have got through an awful lot of my beer today on the back of that. David, you're claiming medicinal reasons just to drink all of my beer.
It's a special blend of paracetamol and
and my beer.
And your beer.
And my beer, yeah. Yes, quite. Can we talk about what we're going to talk about? We should probably say here.
Yeah.
We should apologise, okay? Because we do read our comments, we do look at our comments, and we have some viewers, particularly new viewers, and they say, "Why didn't you actually talk about what you're supposed to talk about?" Or "Why did it take you 20 minutes before you got to the point?" Comments like that, which okay, I totally understand, and we apologise for. So let's get on with it.
Yes.
Let's talk about a review of my Akai 4000 DB, shall we?
Yes.
My beautiful 4000 DB. Shall I tell you where it came from? Shall I tell you a bit of a backstory?
Go on then.
Okay, so I bought this when I was a student.
Yep.
And there was a reason why I bought this as a student, because I couldn't afford a really decent cassette player.
I thought you were going to say you couldn't afford a decent reel-to-reel.
This is going to go downhill fast. So at the time, I mean, Nakamichi's, forget about it. I couldn't get close.
Yeah.
There were some really nice Sonys around.
Yeah.
TCK, 120s or whatever they were back in the day. Forgive me if I get that wrong.
Yeah.
You
mean like decent Sony cassette decks?
Yes, absolutely. And there were some really nice Iowa cassette decks around the time. In fact, I think you had one. You had a really nice Iowa cassette deck.
It had an ADF 550 or 650
something like that. I remember there were a couple of really nice ones, and but I couldn't afford them, so I bought a second-hand reel-to-reel. I think I paid £40 for this. Wow! Because it actually trumps cassette decks in so many ways.
Yes.
Because there's two key factors here, aren't there? So tape width.
Yep.
And speed of which the tape goes round, the real speed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cassette deck is inherently flawed, isn't it? Because you've got a really narrow tape
going very slowly,
going incredibly slowly, stupidly slowly, and even on a very sort of entry-level deck like this, it trumps it in every level.
Yeah.
So actually, the sound quality you can get from this compared to a cassette deck is immense.
Yeah, it certainly can be. So
you're being mean. You're being really mean. And look, I'm going to stop you there, and I'm going to tell you why I know this, and it's your fault, because I remember, you probably won't remember this, but I remember coming round to your house when I just bought this, and I was, still sort of polishing it, and coming round to your house, and you had at the time, you had a Riga Planer 3, can't remember your cartridge, but you had an NVA AP30 amplifier. Yeah. And I remember getting you to record some albums for me onto this, so I could take them back to uni and listen to them in my sort of bedsit, as it were, my shared studenty house. And it sounded absolutely stonking. It sounded absolutely amazing, and I was so. And do you know, I've still got those reels, those reel-to-reels. It would be really interesting to see what's on them.
Yep.
Well,
as long as we'd never recorded ourselves. But that might be blackmailable material, I think.
I mean, you can imagine what we were recording, what sort of music we were recording back then.
Yeah,
So,
lots of 80s,
yeah,
cool 80s
very
indie,
cool.
indie type stuff.
Very much so. So that's what they'll be
Yeah.
jam packed with.
Yeah.
But I always thought, you know, it was very, very faithful to the original for whatever you played. And the other thing I loved about it was you could put it on at night and sort of fall asleep to your music,
Yeah.
and the reel would just run out. The spool would just run out. Not like when you had your, you know, you saved up all your money for, you know, an expensive moving magnet cartridge, and you wake up in the morning, it's still in the run out groove, and it used to go, oh no, I don't believe it. You know, that's just taken, you know,
about 15% closer to this
death.
stylus being
exactly.
Yeah.
But with this, it didn't matter, and I loved that. And in fact, this has a shut off feature.
Yes.
So when it spools out, then the capstan goes down, and bang, it kind of cuts off.
Well, it was very good for recording the Cocteau Twins and then putting them on and sort of falling asleep to Victoria Land. It was that kind of thing
100%.
you did in an 80s
It really was.
student
really
novel, wasn't it?
Yeah,
basically?
absolutely. Yes.
So,
and I still think it's a work of art. I still think it
Yes.
looks absolutely majestic and beautiful.
Yes.
Even now. And I think the reason why is because this looks just like something out of Joe 90. and you know the beginning of Joe 90, you know, the do. It looks just like the beginning of Joe 90. And when he sits in the chair, and he has all of the stuff around him, and Jerry Anderson pans to the wall, and they've got cassettes, reels going around on the
now,
wall.
Mike.
Exactly, this is Joe 90, right? So do you know the machine he sits in?
Yeah.
So that's called the Big Rat.
Okay.
Did you know that?
No.
Okay, so it's called the Big Rat. So
Is that an acronym?
It is.
or
Guess
something?
what it stands for?
No idea.
It stands for Brain Impulse Galvanoscope Record and Transfer. So what it would do is take brain impulses on Akai reel-to-reel cassette decks, tape decks, and it would program them into Joe 90. So I've got pretty much everything I need to be Joe 90.
Well, yes.
All I need is your brainwave patterns. If I have your brainwave patterns, then I can talk about DACs all day long. And I can say, this is the TCK 322D DAC, and things like that, just like you.
We also need a Barry Gray soundtrack as well.
That would be brilliant stuff. Do you know, actually, it's really funny to say that as well. Sorry, but you've just said something amazing here. Our theme tune, which is actually called UFO, which was by Jerry Anderson, was called UFO because it sounds like a Barry Gray soundtrack. How cool's that, you see?
That's very
By
cool.
our good friend Simon Lythe. Symes, if you're watching, there you go, mate. Good plug in there. So yes, that's it. How good is that? So we actually have our own UFO theme tune.
Yes. Well,
Brilliant.
that's wonderful. We've now wasted at least 10 minutes of the review, which I was trying to make it a serious review.
Were you?
About the...
Well, we've never done that before.
Right. Well, let me just turn that off before something blows up.
It's been going for 40 years. Why would it blow up?
It's making a lot of noise, actually, Mike. I hate to tell you.
It's cooling down.
The motor sounds like a Harley Davidson with a failing big end at the moment. So,
That's
so I'm just
so cruel.
hoping it's going to last and without it catching fire before the end of this riff. But shall we say Mike's version is suboptimal?
No,
I think
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. How dare you? How dare you?
Anyway, so as I was so rudely interrupted for 10 minutes, so the reason we're featuring the 4000 DS, and this is a
DB
DS Mark II Dolby version called the DB. Thank you for that, Mike.
You're welcome. Don't diss my deck.
I'd never dream of it. So, well, I would actually, but I'll do it later. So this sold from 1973 to 1978, and the important thing about this deck was that it was the tape deck for people who wanted something a little bit better than cassette, I would say.
Yes.
And that's kind of what you've been...
That's exactly why I bought it.
So,
well, it's because I couldn't afford a cassette.
Well, basically...
Because it is a pain in the butt, to be perfectly fair.
Yes.
You know, to spool it and reel it. And it's not exactly random access, is it, when you're trying to find the next track?
Not exactly.
No.
So we will have open reel hardcore people watching this. Hello, Dave Denyer. Hi. Who will be absolutely falling to bits laughing at this machine, because it is so far down the evolutionary scale.
Yes.
That it's almost it's almost off the radar. But the point is that this was the cheapest half decent open reel machine that you could buy, and a result of that, it was immensely popular in the 70s.
Sold by bucket loads.
Yeah.
And also, don't knock it till you've tried it, because it actually sounds really, really good.
Yeah.
Which is why it's sold by the bucket loads.
Yeah.
Amazing. I think it was like about £170
Yeah.
when it came out.
Yeah.
I think I paid 40 quid for that.
You were done.
They've kind of gone up in value. Look, I tell you what, I will get it serviced. I will get it revamped, because I think it's worth it. I think it's just a beautiful piece of hi-fi equipment. I genuinely do.
Well, what it did do, and the reason it was so popular, is that in order to buy a really good cassette deck that gave anywhere near the same performance, you had to buy a Nakamichi Tri-Tracer or something like that.
Yes,
when it came out in the early 70s, cassette was pretty terrible generally, and it was also very expensive. The really good ones were very, very expensive, so this gave you, as it were, as good or if not better performance than top cassette decks for half the price.
Yeah.
So if you were into tape, then and you couldn't afford, gazillion pounds on a NAC Tri-Tracer or a Sony TC177 or something cassette deck, then you would buy this, and it had a frequency response of up to 23 kilohertz. So neither of us can now hear that high. Especially,
and you've got a cold at the moment.
Especially with me with my cold, I can only hear about 3 kilohertz. But basically, it was a kind of cheap. It's like a kind of like, I don't know, sort of Lotus Cortina or something. It was cheap power, wasn't it? It was cheap performance.
Yes.
But without all the sort of fancy stuff.
Yes.
And of course, the favourite sort of serious semi-pro or domestic deck at that time was the Revox A77,
which was fabulous. Yeah.
And that was very good, but that was a lot more expensive.
It was.
And it was a kind of grown-up semi-pro machine that used to pop up in small studios, that was then replaced by the B77, which was also an extremely good deck, but again about 5 or 6 times the price of this. So the point is, this was cheap performance, and if you had open reel tapes, as many people did in those days, you could, at 7.5 inches per second, you could get 30 hertz to 23 kilohertz, and decent speed stability. So it was 0.15% wow and flutter, which is terrible by modern standards, but it was okay then. It was pretty good then. So it was like kind of sound per pound, as it were. It gave great sound per pound, and it's a very well made, little thing for its time.
It's gorgeous, isn't it? It's properly made.
Yeah.
And I think you're being very stato as well, if you don't mind me saying, because I'm going to tell you why I love it.
Yeah.
Because it got me into hi-fi.
Yeah.
Not necessarily my Akai here, but but reel to reel did.
Yeah.
So I've got to tell you a quick story here. So my mum had a friend when I was growing up, and I was probably about 7 years old, and we went round to her house, and she had a reel to reel. And I'd never seen anything like it. And I asked her what it was. I remember asking her what it was. And she had a reel, and she threaded it. And I watched her sort of spool it and played. And I could not understand, as a young kid, where the sound was coming from these two things turning around. It was like magic. It was just like magic. And do you know what she had? She had a pre-recorded reel-to-reel tape of Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel.
Wow.
And that was the first thing I ever heard on a proper hi-fi system, which with front end was a reel-to-reel, and it blew me away. Wow. And really, that was my absolute introduction to hi-fi. And I always wanted to own one since then. I always did. Have you owned one of these?
I've never had a 4000 DS actually, but
I've got some hi-fi that you've never owned. That's never going to happen ever again on Hi-Fi Riff.
Yes, I always wanted a decent deck, so...
Oh yeah, put it down now. You've just said how good it was.
Well,
you've just said how good it was. And now you're saying you've never had one and I've got one.
Well, absolutely. I've never had an open reel deck with Dobby as well. That's a hell of a pose. Mike, would you like to switch on and off the Dobby system?
Yeah, but do you know what?
Demonstrate?
Yeah, sure. There we go. It's a little green light there. But do you know what? You always turn it off, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, there's actually no point in having it at all, because, what's wrong with a bit of tape here? So I'd rather have that and hear the cymbals.
Yes.
Then sort of cut everything out. So it's actually a bit irrelevant, I'm afraid.
And to prevent interference from FM radio with the Dolby system, they always had an MPX filter, didn't they? A high filter.
Yes.
That used to lop off the treble. I think it's about 15 kilohertz. So you kind of took out a bit of your treble with Dolby. But
you did.
Yeah, it's a kind of my first reel-to-reel, isn't it?
It is.
My first serious reel-to-reel, proper reel-to-reel.
Yeah.
It's kind of a gateway drug.
It is
into becoming someone like Dave Denyer.
100%, 100%. Dave Denyer, who we know through the Hi-Fi industry, who is a proper bloke when it comes to reel-to-reels, a proper dude.
One of the sort of taken over the mantle almost of Tim de Paravicini.
He's the ledge.
Open reel circles.
No, 100%. And sorry we missed you at the Hi-Fi show because it's your round, Danya. Can I just tell you as well? This has got a party trick.
Yeah.
Because you can multi-track on this.
You can. Yeah.
And I recorded a song on this.
Oh my god.
I did. I recorded a song called Cliched Hum on this with my pal Nick Brown when we were at uni together.
Right.
We spent an evening in a bedroom recording. He played bass.
Right.
And guitar.
Yeah.
And he sang. In fact, I didn't think I did anything actually. No, I definitely did something on it. But recorded a song. Yeah. It was never a hit.
No,
I've thought John Peel might have played it.
Yeah,
it was sort of his kind of ilk,
right?
Sort of crap and studenty. But it had this amazing way you could multi-track.
Well, I think I speak on behalf of the viewers, Mike, say we'd all like to hear it.
I'm sure you would. I could probably maybe not. Maybe not.
Maybe that's one for some live event some other time.
Maybe it's not that either.
What's it called again? Something hum?
I've forgotten now.
All right.
Sorry.
So, anyway. Yeah, but actually, you could with this. Would you like to press the sound on sound rocker switch, Mike?
Yes, it's SOS. Look, I thought it was something to do with ABBA, but apparently not.
So, named after a popular magazine that musos buy, obviously. So basically you could bounce a track, you could record a track and then bounce it across, and then whilst you're doing that you could mix it with something else and put that on that other track and then
you could.
Do that.
It's really clever, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like a Tascam or something,
no,
Porter Studio, but you could actually it was a bit fiddly, but you could do it. You could actually do it, which is one of the beauties of this format, isn't it?
Yeah, well,
it's
again,
really
it was
nice.
Kind of like a sort of, Porter Studio. Remember those cassette Porter Studios?
I really do. Yeah.
But kind of before that, it was a kind of open reel version of that. So
it was.
It got so much use. Amateur musicians and people, doing all kinds of creative stuff. It's not bad sounding, I would say, and it's kind of a significant product in the same way that a Ford Cortina was a significant product.
Yeah,
a lot of people had them. Yeah, they had a lot of utility. They were good enough for the job in hand, and they were affordable.
And they sold bucket loads.
They sold absolute bucket loads.
This is around about MReg in old money, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
73, 74.
I think it's around something around there. Yeah.
And the thing is that it was kind of like the dying days of reel-to-reel, because by the time they stopped, reel-to-reel is a domestic format. So by the time they stopped making these in 78, then cassette was really beginning to get...
it got massive traction then, didn't it? Yeah, it did. It did.
Cassette decks from 1978 were generally much better than those in 73.
Yes, they were.
So you could get a lot more performance for your money.
Yeah.
And people began to think, well, I'll just go for the cassette deck.
And it was so much easier. I mean, actually, it's a pain in the butt doing this, isn't it? In cassettes, half, that's that big instead of that big. So, quite.
And a couple of years later, maybe 79, I think, metal tape came on the scene, and then you really started to get good performance from cassette decks.
You did,
and it was kind of all over bar the shouting for reel-to-reel as a kind of domestic format. So apart from the super high end, obviously.
But hey, look, I still love mine, and I'll tell you what we'll do. Okay, I will get this serviced. We'll do a follow-up supplementary riff on it when it's firing on all four cylinders, and you can have a listen to it, and we'll see what we think then, haven't we? Because we haven't really had a chance to listen to it, because it does need a bit of TLC. So
I think that's putting it politely.
There we go. Okay. So look, we won't do a riffometer.
No.
And we'll park it there.
Yep.
And say, to be continued, as it were. But there we are.
The only thing I would add, is that you can still buy these. Quite a few of them pop up in the classifieds.
But for heaven's sake, don't. Is that what you're going to say?
No.
Okay.
So obviously, if you're going to buy a reel-to-reel, any tape machine, you need to have a long, hard look at how knackered they are.
Yes.
There are some specialists around who can service them and fix them, and that's brilliant. But don't think you can buy one for 150 quid and it'll sound like a brand new one.
No, sure.
But still, if you're into the hobby, and it's kind of a fun hobby,
It's great fun.
and they can sound surprisingly good, even this sort of modest machine like this.
Yeah, it can sound amazing.
Yeah.
And also it's quite faithful to the recording.
Yeah.
So, if you've got some lovely recordings,
Yeah.
then hey presto.
Yeah.
There we go. There we are, look at that. A proper retro riff with a proper piece of equipment for a change. And on that note,
Don't change the subject, Mike.
and on that note, thank you so much for watching this episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks a million.
Bye.
Bye.